This is a fictional story created for emotional and reflective purposes. Any resemblance to actual persons or events is purely coincidental. If this story touches you, consider sharing it with someone who may need a reminder: love never really leaves. Grab a cup of tea, sit back. Let this story speak to your heart. Every school day, precisely at 3:15 p.m., the same man stood near the large metal gate of St. Andrew's Elementary. He was not a teacher. He didn't have a child enrolled in the school. He never spoke to anyone. But he was always there. He wore a brown fedora hat, a slightly faded gray coat that hugged his tall frame, and scuffed black shoes that had long stopped resisting the elements. In his right hand, always a folded umbrella, rain or shine. His face had the softness of someone who once smiled often, though now those smiles had long been replaced by stillness. Children noticed him. So did teachers. Parents at first assumed he was waiting for a late child, perhaps a forgetful one who always stayed behind. But as weeks turned into months and years blurred into the sameness of routine, the man with the brown hat remained. At first nobody asked. In a world where people hurry from one task to another, curiosity tends to be stifled by convenience. But something about his presence began to settle into people's awareness. Like wallpaper in a familiar room, you don't notice it until one day it's gone. But he was never gone. On rainy days, he stood with the umbrella open, not for himself, but held loosely as if shielding someone beside him. On snowy afternoons, his boots stood planted firmly, melting small circles into the white with a kind of quiet defiance. He never checked his watch. He never looked bored, just there, looking toward the school doors, waiting. Ms. Linda Morris, the school's longest-serving receptionist, was the first to take true notice. On her third year working the front desk, she spotted him from the second-floor window while sorting attendance slips. She thought it strange parents usually clustered in cars or huddled under the eaves. He stood alone. Always. So one spring afternoon, she asked a colleague, "Who is that man out there, the one with the umbrella?" The colleague shrugged. "No idea. He's just always been there. I think I remember him when my nephew studied here. And that was 10 years ago." Linda blinked. 10 years? She let it go. For a while. Curiosity whispered, but responsibility yelled louder. Until one Friday in April, when she stayed late for a parent-teacher event and the parking lot emptied. The man stood alone. She made herself a tea, walked outside. "Hello, sir," she offered, gently approaching. He turned toward her. His eyes were startlingly alive, light brown like sunlight through weak coffee. There was no confusion, no hostility, just warmth. "Good evening," he said politely, voice deep but soft. "You must be new here." Linda chuckled. 3 years, not that new. He smiled faintly. "Time passes quietly here." There was silence between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence you can only share with someone who isn't trying to fill it. "Forgive me," she said carefully, "but I've noticed you come here often." He nodded, not offended in the slightest. "Every day. You're waiting for someone." He looked back at the doors, the windows above, and said with a certainty that made her chest ache, "My daughter." She finishes school at 3:15. Linda hesitated. She didn't want to offend him, didn't want to push, but she had read every student file over the past 3 years, and she knew there was no girl listed under his last name. "And her name is," she asked softly. "Amelia," he said, and something in his voice, something so full of tenderness, broke her heart a little. She nodded. "Pretty name." He smiled again. "She has her mother's eyes, but her stubbornness. That's all me." Then he tipped his hat. "Have a good evening, miss." And just like that, he turned, walked down the sidewalk, each step steady, deliberate, and disappeared past the row of trees leading to Maple Avenue. Linda stood there long after he was gone. The steam from her tea had long faded, but her thoughts hadn't. That night she searched the school archives. There was no Amelia registered at St. Andrews in recent years. But in a dusty cardboard box of old documents stored in the basement, she found a list. a single-page paper attendance list dated from 2003. The name Amelia Rowe, grade 2, was listed. Linda froze. The man, Mr. Rowe. But the worst part, the part that made her stomach tighten and her heart sink, was the note beside the name. Withdrawn, April 17, 2003. Deceased traffic accident. Tomorrow would be April 17th, exactly 20 years ago. Linda closed the file slowly. That night, for the first time in a long time, she cried for a stranger. The rain was gentle that morning. Tiny droplets patterned the large front office window at St. Andrew's Elementary, sparkling like quiet tears that hadn't quite fallen. Linda arrived earlier than usual. She wasn't sure why, only that something inside her urged her to be there to stand by the second-floor window at precisely 3:15 p.m., just as he had done for the past 2 decades. She brewed a cup of peppermint tea, her fingers still slightly shaky from a restless night. She had read Amelia Rowe's name dozens of times, replayed the words withdrawn, deceased as if they might change with repetition. A second-grade girl, a traffic accident, and a father who never left. At 2:50 p.m., the ticking of the wall clock grew louder. Linda couldn't sit still. Tea in hand, she slowly made her way down the hallway to the front windows that overlooked the school gate. And there he was, exactly as she had imagined. The same gray coat, the same black umbrella still folded, the same posture slightly leaning forward as if expecting to catch a fleeting glimpse of something long gone. But today something was different. It was raining, and he hadn't opened his umbrella. He let the water soak his thinning hair, his shoulders, his eyes fixed on the school doors, unwavering. Something inside Linda twisted. He remembered. Today was the day, April 17th, 20 years. She hadn't meant to go outside, but her feet moved before her thoughts caught up. Within moments, she was stepping off the front steps, her own umbrella popping open with a soft click. She walked carefully across the lot, approaching him like one might approach a gravestone, quietly, respectfully. "Mr. Rowe," she said softly. He turned. His hair was soaked, but his expression was calm kind. The same warm eyes, the same gentle acknowledgement. "Hello, Miss Linda," he replied. "You didn't open your umbrella." He gave a faint smile. "I wanted to feel it today. The rain. Just like that day." Linda didn't say anything at first. She wasn't sure what was appropriate, if anything was. But he didn't seem bothered by her presence. In fact, he looked comforted. "Was it here," she asked gently, "where it happened?" He shook his head. "No. On the way to school, a truck ran a red light." The words fell like pebbles into a still pond. "I had a meeting that morning," he continued. "My wife took her. It was the only day I didn't drive her myself." Linda felt her chest tighten. "She never forgave herself," he added almost in a whisper. "And you?" she asked quietly. "There's nothing to forgive. I just wanted to keep coming back. If Amelia made it to school that day, she'd have come out the gate at 3:15. So I do too." "Every single day?" He nodded. At first I hoped, he said, eyes still on the gate. Hoped I'd see her again in the crowd. Then I hoped for a feeling, a memory, something. Eventually, I stopped hoping. I just wanted her to know if her spirit ever wandered, I'd be right here, waiting. Linda didn't realize she had started crying until she tasted salt on her lips. There was something about the way he spoke, without pity, without drama, that made the story hit even harder. "My wife passed 5 years ago," he added. "Cancer. Before she left, she held my hand and said, 'If I see her first, I'll hold her tight.'" Linda thought of something her mother once told her: love isn't about letting go. It's about staying long enough to be remembered. She pulled a handkerchief from her coat and offered it to him. He gently pressed his hand to his chest. "Thank you, but I'm all right. Today feels lighter." She didn't know what exactly made him say that. Maybe because 20 years had passed, maybe because something invisible had been resolved, maybe because he felt her nearby. He glanced at the clock on the bell tower. 3:15. The school gate creaked open and waves of students spilled out, laughing, shouting, backpacks bouncing behind them. A world of motion and life he no longer belonged to, yet somehow remained a part of. He stood still, the noise flowing around him like wind against a stone. Then he nodded slightly. "She's running a little late today," he said with a soft grin. Rain slows everything down. Linda smiled through the ache in her throat. They stood together in the rain, one holding an umbrella, one not. And in that quiet moment, she no longer saw a strange old man waiting for a child who would never return. She saw a father who chose to keep standing at the last place where he still felt close to her. And she understood sometimes love isn't found in grand gestures. It's in the quiet waiting, in the act of showing up day after day just so someone somewhere might know they were never forgotten. After that rainy April afternoon, something shifted in Linda. She found herself thinking about him not just at 3:15, not just when she glanced out the window, but in quiet moments. Over breakfast, on her commute, when she was brushing her teeth at night. It wasn't pity, it was something else, a kind of reverence, a recognition that in the fast-moving world they lived in someone's still honored time, still waited, still remembered. On Monday, she packed a second cup of coffee. By 3:10 p.m., she was outside again, standing under the covered steps with 2 steaming paper cups in hand. And as always there, he was, Mr. Rowe, same coat, same folded umbrella, same steady presence. He noticed her and smiled gently. "You're back." She nodded. "Thought you might want something warm today." He accepted the cup with both hands like someone being offered more than just a beverage. "Thank you," he said. "That's very kind." They stood in silence as children began to emerge from the doors again. Linda sipped her coffee and watched them, ponytails, bouncing sneakers, slapping pavement, colorful backpacks, bouncing on little spines. She found herself wondering what Amelia might have looked like at that age. 12, 15, then 20 now. Would she have gone to college, moved away, or stayed near home and visited every Sunday? She liked strawberry milk, Mr. Rowe said, suddenly breaking the silence. Linda turned to him. Amelia. Hated plain milk. Loved the pink stuff. Used to say it tasted like birthday parties. Linda smiled. She sounds like she had a bright spirit. She did. Used to wear mismatched socks on purpose. Called them her lucky legs. I could never get her to match them. He chuckled. Linda did too. "Did you ever—" She hesitated, unsure if it was too much to ask. "Did you ever write anything down about her?" Mr. Rowe nodded slowly. "I did. For a while after she passed. Then I stopped. It felt like I was writing to a silence that didn't write back." "Would you mind—" she began, then stopped herself. But he understood. "Would I bring it?" She looked up at him. "Only if you're comfortable." He gave her a long, thoughtful look, then nodded. The next day at 3:15, he arrived with a small leather-bound notebook tucked beneath his coat. It was worn, its edges curled like petals, the leather softened by age and grief. "I started this the week after the funeral," he said, handing it to her. "I haven't opened it in years." Linda hesitated. "Are you sure?" "I trust you," he said, simple as that. She waited until she got home that night, brewed a cup of chamomile tea, sat by the lamp in her small apartment and opened the notebook like a sacred thing. Inside were entries, dozens of them. Short letters, observations, small moments frozen in ink. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, and the tone wasn't tragic, it was loving, honest, sometimes funny. "Today would have been your first school recital. You used to practice your twinkle twinkle on the living room rug, jumping up and down between notes. The neighbors hated it. I loved it. Your mom finally donated your books today. She cried when she gave away your dog-eared copy of Charlotte's Web. I kept your favorite blanket. It still smells like your strawberry shampoo. Sometimes I dream you're just upstairs, and I hear your footsteps on the stairs. Then I wake up, and it's only the wind." Linda read until her eyes stung. She wasn't just reading about Amelia, she was meeting her, getting to know her through the eyes of a man who had loved her completely and lost her too soon. The next day, she returned the notebook with reverence. "Thank you," she said, placing it gently back into his hands. He nodded, eyes soft. "Thank you for seeing her." Linda hesitated. "I think you should keep writing." He raised an eyebrow. "She's still with you," she said. "Maybe not the way she used to be, but you still see her, talk to her. I think she still listens." He didn't respond right away, but she saw something shift in his face like the smallest crack letting in light. That evening, he picked up a pen for the first time in 17 years. Today, someone reminded me that love doesn't disappear, it just changes shape. You're still my daughter, I'm still your dad, and this, my little one, is my promise to keep remembering. Mr. Rowe had become part of the scenery. People noticed him, the way they noticed the school sign or the yellow crosswalk stripes, always there, always familiar, never questioned. Parents walked by with quick greetings or polite nods. Children sometimes pointed and whispered, "That's the man who waits," as though he were a storybook character in the flesh. But they didn't ask. No one asked. Except Linda. It wasn't just the letters in the notebook that moved her. It was the quiet integrity of the man himself. There was something undeniably powerful about a person who chose to stay rooted in love in memory without demanding attention or sympathy. He wasn't loud. He didn't campaign grief. He just showed up. That week she brought him a thermos of tea green with honey. He smiled, accepting it like a gift far too generous. "I hope you don't mind me bothering you every afternoon," she said. "You're not a bother," he replied gently. "In fact, you may be the first person to truly talk to me in years." Linda looked down. "Really?" He nodded. "People pass by. Sometimes they nod, smile, but mostly they move on. That's okay. The world has to keep spinning." She didn't know what to say. And then she realized maybe that was the point. Sometimes what mattered wasn't what you said, but simply that you were there. She sat down next to him on the low stone wall beside the school fence. They watched as the final bell rang and children flooded the exit, some sprinting, some dragging their feet, some glued to their phones or chattering with friends. Mr. Rowe smiled as if each child carried a little light. "I used to imagine her among them," he said. "At first I'd look for a girl her age. Then as the years passed I adjusted. I imagined what she'd look like at 10, then 12, then 15. He paused, then said quietly, "Now I don't imagine her age. I just feel her." Linda looked over at him. The lines on his face were deep, but not hardened. His voice carried neither bitterness nor delusion, just truth. "She never really left me. I think maybe grief is just love with nowhere to go. So I bring it here, and I let it wait with me." Linda felt something shift inside her. We often treat grief like a wound to be hidden, a weakness to be overcome. But what if it's simply proof that love existed, that someone mattered? That weekend, Linda told her sister about him. They hadn't talked deeply in a while, life had gotten in the way. They met for coffee, and somewhere between sips, Linda said, "There's this man I know. He lost his daughter 20 years ago, and he still waits at the school gate every day at 3:15. Her sister's eyes softened. "Why? Because that's when she would have come out. He just wants her to know he's still there." Her sister grew quiet. Then after a long pause whispered, "That's beautiful." Linda nodded. "It is." And in that moment, Linda realized what Mr. Rowe had unknowingly done. He'd become more than a father in grief. He'd become a mirror, a quiet reminder of the kind of love we often overlook or take for granted, the kind that stays, waits, shows up even when it hurts. She started to notice more. A young boy who held the gate for his mother every afternoon. An elderly woman who sat on her porch, rain or shine, knitting alone. A janitor who swept the same hallway twice, not because it was dirty, but because it gave him a rhythm to his day. There were people like Mr. Rowe everywhere, keepers of quiet rituals, acts of remembrance, acts of presence. But the world didn't ask about them. The world kept moving. And Mr. Rowe, he kept waiting. The school year edged closer to its end. Spring crept into the trees, coaxing pink blossoms out of gray branches. The days stretched longer, the shadows shorter. But Mr. Rowe's routine never changed. 3:15 p.m. Same spot, same coat, same silence. Some days Linda joined him. Others she simply watched from her office window, holding a coffee that cooled in her hand as she wondered what it meant to keep showing up for someone who wasn't coming back. One Thursday, as she stepped outside with 2 cups of tea, she noticed something in his hand. A small, cream-colored envelope. No name, no address, just sealed. He saw her glance. "Found it in a drawer yesterday," he said before she could ask. "It's from Amelia." Linda's breath caught. "She wrote to you." He nodded, fingers brushing over the edge of the envelope like it might dissolve. "The last thing she gave me. Her teacher assigned them a project, write a letter to someone you love. I remember her giving it to me before bed. Said, 'Don't read it till tomorrow.'" A pause. Tomorrow never came. He held the envelope between his fingers so lightly it might float away. "I've never opened it," he continued. "I kept it safe, in a little wooden box with her hairbrush and her bracelet. Every time I thought about reading it, I couldn't." "Why?" Linda asked gently. He looked out toward the gate. The children were pouring out again, backpacks, bouncing, voices rising like birds. "Because he said if I opened it, it would become the last thing she ever said to me, and I wasn't ready for goodbye." Linda stood beside him in stillness. The envelope trembled slightly in the wind. But now she asked. He smiled sadly. "Now I don't want it to stay unread. Love should be heard even if it's just a whisper from the past." He handed it to her. Linda stepped back unsure. "Mr. Rowe, this is yours." He nodded. "I want you to read it, out loud, please." She hesitated, then slowly peeled the seal open, careful not to tear the flap. Inside was a piece of paper folded in thirds, pink stationery, crayon handwriting, and the faintest trace of strawberry-scented stickers. Linda's voice shook as she began. "Dear Daddy, I like when you laugh. You laugh different than other people, like your eyes laugh too. When I grow up, I want to work at a zoo and name all the penguins. But if I don't, that's okay. I'll live in a house next door to you and make you pancakes every day. Even when I'm a grown-up, you're still my best friend. Love, Amelia." Linda blinked away tears, holding the letter with both hands. She dared not look at him. Mr. Rowe stood silent, head bowed slightly. Then, after a long moment, he exhaled. "I didn't know she noticed my laugh," he said quietly. Linda folded the letter with care and offered it back to him. But he shook his head. "Keep it. For when someone forgets that love leaves footprints." Linda pressed the paper to her chest, as if holding it for every father who never got to hear another bedtime story. Every child who never got to say goodbye. Every human being who had loved in silence. The sun was low now, casting golden light over the sidewalk, over the fence, over the quiet man in the worn coat. A father who had waited for 2 decades. Not for closure, not for answers, but simply to make sure his daughter's voice still had a place in the world. And now it did. In a letter that smelled faintly of strawberries and childhood. In a woman who would never forget his name. And in the space by the school gate where love still stood unmoved by time. They started calling him the waiting man. It began with a whisper in the hallways, the way children invent legends from things they don't understand. First graders pointed from buses. Third graders invented stories, some silly, some tender. One child claimed he was a magician waiting for a daughter who turned into a bird. Another said he was a king in hiding. But the one that stuck was simple. He waits because he loves. The phrase came from a small girl named Elsie. She had long braids and a habit of watching people quietly, the way only very young children or very old souls do. One day, as her mother pulled up in the pickup line, she said, "Mom, do you know that man at the gate?" Her mother glanced. "He's always there, isn't he?" Elsie nodded. "He's waiting for his daughter." "Oh." Her mother looked in the rearview mirror. "Did someone tell you that?" "No," Elsie said. "But you don't wait that long for just anyone." And so it spread. Not in a dramatic way, not like gossip. It became more like an accepted truth, like how the bell rings at 3:00, or how Thursdays smell like bleach from hallway cleaning. The waiting man stood by the gate, and he was part of the school. Some students began waving to him. Others would smile or say, "Good afternoon, sir." Mr. Rowe always nodded, sometimes smiled, but he never explained. He didn't need to. Linda noticed the shift. Something had changed, not in him, but in how the world responded to him. He was no longer invisible. He had not asked to be seen, but people had begun to look anyway. One afternoon, a boy about 10 years old stopped in front of Mr. Rowe and said, "My sister says your daughter's in heaven. Is that true?" Linda, standing nearby, froze. But Mr. Rowe looked down with the calm of someone who had made peace long ago. "She is," he said. The boy nodded. "My grandpa's in heaven too. Do you think they meet people up there?" "I like to think so." "Then maybe she knows him." The boy grinned. "He likes checkers. She could play with him." Mr. Rowe's eyes twinkled. She'd like that. And just like that, the boy walked off, leaving behind something small but powerful acknowledgement. He had treated Mr. Rowe not as a mystery, but as someone real, someone worthy of conversation, a man with a story. That evening, as Linda and Mr. Rowe sat together, she said, "The children are starting to notice you." He smiled. "Children always see more than we give them credit for. They're curious. Curiosity is a kind of kindness," he said. "It means they're trying to understand, even if they don't have the words yet." Linda nodded slowly. "They asked me today if I'm sad," he added after a pause. I told them yes. "But I'm also grateful. Grateful for the time I had, for the laughter, for mismatched socks and pancake mornings. You can hold sadness and gratitude in the same hand, you know." Linda looked out at the sidewalk at the places where little sneakers had passed just minutes ago. "You make it look easy," she whispered. "It's not," he said, "but it is important." Important. The word echoed in her chest. In a world that rushes toward forgetting pain, forgetting grief, forgetting people, here was a man who remembered. Not just in thought, but in presence. He had shown up every day not to move on, but to stand still long enough for others to feel what enduring love looks like. Maybe that was the lesson the children saw. Not magic, not sadness. Just love in its quietest, bravest form. It was Linda's idea. One afternoon, as she stood beside Mr. Rowe, beneath a sky that was beginning to soften into summer, she looked at the patch of grass near the old oak tree just inside the school fence and said, "You should have a bench." Mr. Rowe turned to her. "A bench." She nodded. "You've been here longer than most of the staff. Probably longer than some of the bricks in this building. You've earned a place to sit." He chuckled, the sound low and warm. "I suppose my knees would agree with you." So she brought it up at the next faculty meeting. At first there were puzzled looks, a few awkward questions, for him, but why? But Linda spoke clearly with quiet conviction. She told them about Amelia, about the notebook, about the envelope, about what it meant to show up for someone even when the world moved on. The room went silent. The principal, a pragmatic woman who rarely allowed sentiment to interfere with policy, finally said, "Let's do it. Let's give him his bench." 2 weeks later it arrived. A simple wooden seat with curved iron legs placed under the oak tree near the school gate. It bore a small bronze plaque that read, "In memory of Amelia Rowe, for the love that waited, and waited still." The morning it was installed, Mr. Rowe didn't say much. He ran his fingers over the plaque, then sat down for the first time, not because he was tired, but because it finally felt like he belonged. He sat every day after that, and somehow the act of sitting made people more likely to approach him. Parents, students, even teachers. They sat beside him, some for a moment, others for longer. And he listened, always listened. One father whose son had been acting out sat down beside him on a windy Thursday and said, "I don't know what I'm doing anymore." Mr. Rowe didn't offer advice. He simply said, "There's no handbook for love, but it matters that you're here." A fifth-grade girl sat next to him after school and whispered, "My grandma died. I miss her." He nodded. "Tell me about her." She did for 10 minutes straight. Linda watched all of it from her office window. What began as one man's quiet vigil had become something more. He wasn't just waiting anymore. He was holding space for sorrow, for memory, for love. She joined him one afternoon with 2 iced teas in hand. "You've become the school's unofficial counselor," she teased. He laughed. "If only I had a degree." "You have something better," she said. "You have stillness." They sat for a long while watching the world go by. Then Mr. Rowe asked a question he'd never asked before. "Do you think she knows?" Amelia, Linda asked. He nodded. that I'm still here. Linda thought about it. The bench, the notebook, the unopened letter, the children who waved, the parents who talked, the lives that quietly and surely he had touched. I think she knows, she said. I think she always has. A breeze rustled the leaves above them. The sun filtered through in patches of gold. Mr. Rowe closed his eyes for a moment and let the warmth settle across his face. I don't know how much longer I'll come here, he said softly. Linda looked over, startled. What do you mean? He smiled. I'm not leaving. Not yet. But someday. When I feel she's carried enough of my love with her, and I've said everything there is to say. Linda said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Only to sit and honor and breathe in the beauty of a love that never asked to be understood, only to be remembered. Late May brought a soft kind of heat, the kind that made children restless and teachers tired. The last month of school always carried a certain tension, excitement, exhaustion, and a quiet sadness at the thought of endings. But for Mr. Rowe, nothing was ending. His rhythm remained unchanged. 3:15, the bench, the tree, and now, more often than not, company. People began to leave little things behind, not on purpose, but in that unconscious way humans respond to something sacred. A daisy freshly picked from a nearby lawn, a crayon drawing from a second grader, a picture of a man in a gray coat with a little girl beside him, both smiling. A bookmark tucked into the slats of the bench that read, "You showed me what patience looks like." One day, a teacher left a note folded in half. Mr. Rowe found it after the bell. I never got to say goodbye to my dad. He died while I was still angry. Watching you helps me forgive both of us. Thank you. He read it once, then placed it inside his notebook, alongside the entries to Amelia, as though it belonged there because maybe it did. These were not grand gestures, no flowers wrapped in ribbons, no plaques or parades, just small offerings of connection, gratitude, recognition. The world had started whispering back. Linda noticed something else, too. Mr. Rowe had begun writing again. Every day after the children left, he would pull out a pen and scribble quietly into the old notebook, now held together by tape and time. She asked him once what he was writing. Stories, he said. But not just about Amelia. About everything I see now. Why? Because people forget, he said, tapping the page gently. They forget the small sacred things. I don't want to. He showed her one of the pages. It read, "Today a boy offered me a chocolate chip cookie and didn't take one for himself. He said it was for my daughter. I didn't cry until he left." Linda held the page for a long time. "You should publish these," she whispered. "I don't need the world to read them," he said. "I just want someone to hold them someday. Maybe when I'm gone." "You're not going anywhere yet." "No," he smiled. "Not yet." And yet, there was a change, not in his routine, but in his posture. A subtle lightness, like something heavy had been set down just out of sight. "I used to think grief was a weight," he told Linda later that week. "Something I carried every day. But now I think it's more like a shadow." "A shadow?" He nodded. "It follows. It stretches. Sometimes it swallows you whole, but other times it reminds you where the light is." That night Linda couldn't sleep. She thought of her own father, alive but distant. Their conversations had grown shallow over the years, filled with logistics instead of love. She picked up the phone. It was nearly midnight. He answered on the second ring. "Dad," she said, voice tight. "I just wanted to say, I'm glad you're still here." There was a pause on the other end, then a soft reply, "Me too." And just like that, something shifted. The next afternoon, she brought Mr. Rowe a new notebook. "Just in case," she said, "you run out of pages." He smiled and turned it over in his hands. "Then I suppose I'll have to keep living things worth writing down." Linda sat beside him, and for a moment neither said a word. Because they didn't need to. It hadn't rained in weeks. The sky hung pale and dry over St. Andrew's Elementary, the trees dusty with early summer, and the sidewalks warm to the touch. The children had started counting down the days until break, their voices louder, their legs faster, their goodbyes more distracted. But Mr. Rowe was still there. Same time, Same bench, same patient posture under the old oak tree. Yet something was different. Linda noticed it immediately that Monday. He was wearing a shirt she hadn't seen before, soft blue with a tiny stitched name on the breast pocket. Amelia. She blinked. Where did you get that? He smiled gently. Made it. You so… No, but I'm learning. Why? Because no one else will make it for me. She laughed a quiet laugh, not at him, but near him. And then she asked something she hadn't dared to until now. What was she like, really? Not just the socks and strawberry milk. Who was Amelia Rowe? Mr. Rowe looked out past the fence to where the kids would come running in a few minutes. She was the kind of child who cried when cartoon characters got left behind. She once made me turn the car around to pick up a worm from the sidewalk because it was drying in the sun. He smiled soft and wistful. She didn't care about neatness or rules or what dress her classmates wore. She once told me that growing up was fine as long as I still let her use glitter. Linda leaned forward, chin in hand, listening like a child at story time. She was funny. She didn't even know it. She'd say these things that would knock the wind out of me. One day I was running late and grouchy, and she looked at me and said, "Dad, you dropped your happy." Like it was a sock. She sounds incredible, Linda whispered. She was, still is. He didn't flinch when he used the present tense. Not anymore. His love had long since outlived language. That same afternoon, a young mother sat beside him. Her son had just started kindergarten and she looked exhausted. She didn't speak for several minutes, just watched the children spill out from the school doors. Then she said, "I feel like I'm always failing." Mr. Rowe didn't blink. "Then you're probably doing it right." She looked over, surprised. "If you weren't worried," he said, "you wouldn't be trying. Love is messy. That's how you know it's real." She nodded slowly, then added, "I saw the name on your shirt." "She was my daughter." "She's why you sit here." "Yes." There was silence. Then she reached into her bag and handed him a small photo, a Polaroid of her son. "In case you need someone to wait for, too," she said, blinking away something. He held the photo gently like it might crack. After she left, Linda approached. "She gave you a picture." He nodded. "I don't think she's the only one," he said. She looked confused. Then he opened his notebook. Inside were tucked dozens of small items, notes, cards, photos, even a paper snowflake. People had begun to give him their own memories, their own fragments, their own small sacred things. "They want me to keep them," he said, as if still unsure why. "You've become a keeper," she said. "A keeper of what?" "Love, loss, reminders." He closed the notebook slowly. "Funny," he said. "I used to think I was the only one grieving, but now I think we're all just carrying pieces of people we miss." Linda nodded. "And we need someone to carry them with us." They sat together, no rain above them, no clouds, just dry warmth, a silent bench, and two people who knew that sometimes showing up is the closest thing to healing the world will allow. The bench was empty. Linda noticed it as soon as she pulled into the parking lot. It was 3:12 p.m. The school bell hadn't rung yet. The children hadn't poured out. The tree stood just as it always had, leaves rustling in the June breeze. But the bench, his bench, was empty. She stepped out of her car slowly, the way one moves when something isn't quite right, but hasn't yet been named. She checked her phone. No missed calls, no messages. She walked across the lot and stood near the sidewalk, half expecting him to round the corner at any moment, apologizing for being late. But he didn't come. At 3:15 p.m., the bell rang. The children spilled out of the school loud and bright and bursting with summer. Some slowed as they passed the bench, glancing at it. Others looked around as if expecting the man in the gray coat to appear from the air. He didn't. Linda waited. 5 minutes, 10, 15. Still no sign. By 3:35, only a few lingering students and parents remained. The bench stayed empty, and the shadow it cast seemed longer than usual. Linda sat down, just for a moment. It felt colder than it should have. That night she called the number he had given her months ago, the only contact he ever shared. A landline. It rang 5 times before an old answering machine clicked on. She left a message. "Mr. Rowe, it's Linda, just checking in. You weren't at the gate today. I hope you're okay. Call me if you need anything. Please." She hung up slowly, the kind of slow that comes with the fear of something final. The next morning, he still hadn't called. At school, the children asked questions. Where's the waiting man? Did he go on vacation? Is he sick? Linda had no answers. She found herself staring at the bench throughout the day, unable to concentrate, her chest tight. That afternoon, she sat on the bench again. Alone. The wind tugged at her skirt. The sky was pale and blue and uncaring. Then she saw it. Tucked beneath the armrest, nearly hidden from view, was a folded piece of paper. Her heart thudded. She pulled it free gently, carefully, as if disturbing it might erase something sacred. It was addressed simply, "To those who stayed." Hands trembling, she opened it. "If you're reading this, I've decided to stop waiting in the same place, not because I've forgotten or moved on, but because something in me has shifted. I've spent 20 years showing up rain or shine to prove that love does not vanish with time. But now I see, love does not need proving. It needs sharing. So I'm going to go where I can listen and hold and carry others the way you all carried me. You gave me something I didn't know I needed, not just memory but community. Amelia has always had me. Now I want others to know someone is waiting for them too." With quiet gratitude, J. Rowe, Linda wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, letter still open in her lap. He was gone, but not in the way she feared. He had not disappeared. He had expanded. He had taken everything he learned about loss, about love, about staying, and carried it out into a world that needed it just as badly as he once had. And now the bench waited in his place. It wasn't empty. Not really. Each day someone sat on it. A student with a scraped knee, a parent in a rush, a teacher with a tired heart, a janitor on break, Linda on most days with her tea and her thoughts. And someone always asked who's the bench for, and someone always answered a man who never stopped loving, even when no one saw him. Until they did. And now they always would. Summer arrived, and with it came silence. The kind of silence that fills schools when the halls are empty and the laughter has paused, replaced by distant lawn mowers and the humming of forgotten fans. But the bench stayed. Steady, familiar. Weather-worn, yet strong. Linda still came most days, not always at 3:15, sometimes earlier, sometimes later, but always with something in her hands, a book, a tea, a thought, and sometimes someone joined her. There was the janitor Earl, who usually avoided conversation. One day he walked over, sat down, and said he once asked how my wife was doing. No one ever asks that. There was Marisol, a shy second-grade teacher who had never spoken to Mr. Rowe directly, but admitted, "When my sister passed, I used to watch him from my window. Just knowing he was there helped me get through the days I thought I wouldn't." And then there were the children. They had stopped asking where he was. Now they asked who he was. And the story began to take shape. A girl named Lila asked Linda to write it down so they wouldn't forget. Linda did more than that. She printed his photo, the one he had once shown her, Amelia in his arms, grinning with 2 missing teeth, him smiling like the world had handed him its son. She framed it, added the photo to a small display beside the bench, and wrote beneath it, "J. Rowe. The man who waited, he taught us that love waits, that it listens, that it holds space for what matters most. You are never alone. Please sit, remember, breathe." People did. Some stayed a minute, others lingered. They brought with them scraps of their own lives, tiny heartbreaks, quiet memories, even unopened grief they didn't know they'd been carrying. And somehow, sitting on that bench, the weight grew lighter. One afternoon, a teenager came. He was tall, hoodie-up, earbuds in. He sat beside Linda without a word, pulling his hood lower. After several minutes, he said, "My mom left last year." Linda looked at him gently. "I'm sorry." He shrugged. "People say it gets easier. It doesn't." "No," she said. "It just gets different." More silence. Then he asked, "Did the waiting man know she wouldn't come back?" Linda thought carefully before answering. "I think he knew, but he waited anyway, because he loved her. And love waits not because it expects something, but because it wants to honor what was. The boy nodded slowly, then stood. Before leaving, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small metal keychain, worn and rusted. He placed it on the bench beside the plaque and whispered, "In case she ever comes back." Linda didn't touch it. She let it stay. That evening, she opened Mr. Rowe's second notebook, the one she had given him months ago. Inside on the first page, he had written something in his clear, slow hand. "This bench is no longer mine. It belongs to anyone who has ever waited, loved, lost, or hoped. Sit here and know that someone understands." Linda closed the notebook and rested it in her lap. She realized then he had not left. He had become part of the rhythm of the place, a memory with a pulse, a story that moved without needing to be told. In the middle of a quiet schoolyard beneath an aging oak sat a bench that remembered. And when people sat on it, they were remembered too. The bench had seen another school year come and go. More children had passed by. More parents had sat for a while and wiped their eyes in secret. Linda watched all of it day after day with the quiet steadiness of someone who had learned to listen, not fix. On the first day of the new year, a package arrived in the school's main office. No return address, just a simple craft envelope with one word handwritten on it: Linda. Inside was a worn notebook, the original one, the one with the red ribbon around it, the one she had seen him write in 100 times. She sat at her desk staring at it for a long while, then slowly she untied the ribbon. Inside the front cover was a note, his handwriting unmistakable. "If you're reading this, I've moved on not from Amelia, but from the place where I last saw her. You helped me believe I didn't fail as a father, that remembering is a form of parenting. Thank you for being my witness." She turned the pages, trembling. It was all there. The day he first sat at the gate. The day he almost left, but didn't. The first time someone called him the waiting man. The letter from Amelia, the daisy on the bench, the boy who left the cookie, the girl who drew him as a superhero, his fear, his gratitude, his ache, his quiet joy. At the end of the final page, written with slow, careful ink, was this: "Love does not end. It waits, it listens, it takes different forms, but it does not vanish. To everyone who ever passed by and thought, he's still here, I want you to know something. You are seen, you are remembered, you are not waiting alone." Linda closed the notebook with tears in her eyes and something else in her chest, not sorrow, but a kind of peace. She took it to the bench that afternoon. The sky was gray, the wind soft. There, she placed the notebook inside a weatherproof case mounted beneath the seat. She added a simple inscription: "Read if you need to remember someone, or if you need to remember yourself." Over time, more entries appeared, written by students, parents, strangers, notes of grief, notes of hope. One simply said, "I thought I was invisible. This bench reminded me I'm not." And so in the end, Mr. Rowe's greatest gift wasn't that he waited. It was that he taught others how to be still with what hurts, how to sit beside their sorrow, how to love not by letting go, but by holding on gently, tenderly, without fear. He became a father not just to Amelia, but to a community that had forgotten how much it needed someone like him. And long after his footsteps faded from the sidewalk, his presence remained etched not in stone, but in the hearts of those who finally stopped to sit, to feel, to remember, and to wait. Together. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who might be quietly carrying a memory of their own. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is sit beside someone and say nothing. Thank you for staying until the end. Remember, love doesn't vanish, it transforms, one quiet moment at a time. Subscribe for more stories that speak to the soul.